Perfect.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking a little bit, this agenda for the conversation, a little bit presenting ourselves. I think that I somehow know part of your work because I think you are doing really well this work out loud kind of thing. So I can really have an image about your work, about with which communities you are engaged. But I think I would also like to hear from you. So I can also present myself or why I'm here or what I'm doing here.
Cool.
Yeah, the second part of the agenda was I wanted to present you a little bit some of my hypotheses and ideas about the project that I'm engaged now in. And at the end, I would like to ask you a couple of questions, and maybe we can have a conversation around these topics. I don't know. It sounds good to you?
Sounds very good. I'm delighted that you've thought about it before you arrived.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't want to take much time from you, so yeah. Okay. So yeah, I had like this question that I wanted to ask you. Like, I know it's pretty open, but how did we, in this case, you got to here and to now to this moment? So
yeah.
a little bit, which is your story?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I'm paying attention to at the moment with this pandemic means it shapes what story I tell, right? So the story that I'm telling at the moment is my relationship to apocalypse. So I was raised in this really strict, old-fashioned fundamentalist Christian church, and that meant we believe in heaven and hell. And if you do the wrong things, you're going to go to hell and have infinite suffering for all time. So I was raised very early on with this idea of apocalypse, like that there's a risk of an infinitely bad outcome. And that's really encoded in, it's a really important part of my psychology from my Christian childhood. And then maybe it was the early 2000s, 2003 or 4, that I left the church. And in 2006, I read the report from the UN saying we're in the middle of the 6th mass extinction and humans caused it. And I started paying attention at that point to existential risk and the possibility of social collapse and the near-term possibility of social collapse. And when I say paying attention, it was like, I was in my early 20s and I had some vague sense that things weren't right and that we were in a dangerous position as a species. But I wasn't really supported or equipped to deal with that knowledge or that possibility. And so I lost a lot of time, really. I spent the next 5 years depressed and nihilistic and not very productive or effective or engaged or happy or, really just kind of lost and confused until in 2011, the movement of squares showed up in New Zealand as, in our case, it was Occupy. I know in your case, it would probably be 15M. But I just kind of stumbled into that space and that Occupy camp was the first time that I ever said out loud that I carry fear with me, that I'm afraid that collapse is a real risk. And I don't know how big the risk is. I don't know if it's like 5% chance in my lifetime that we'll see a whole bunch of countries disintegrate, or if it's a 50% chance, or it's a 1/5 millionth of a chance. I don't know what the ratio is. I haven't got the intellectual capacity to make sense of those numbers, but just emotionally carrying around the possibility of existential risk and social collapse really incapacitated me all the way until I could start talking about it in 2011. So that was like a graduation coming out through that process of being allowed, I allowed my own fear, allowed my own extreme concerns, and through that process, when I stopped trying to avoid my fear and I just owned my fear, then it wasn't such a big deal anymore. It was just a little thing. It was just a component of my life like all the other pieces. And I've also got joy, and I've got hope, and I've got sadness, and I've got a whole spectrum of different feelings that I visit from time to time when I'm I'm in, mindful and embodied. And what came through when I allowed myself to just experience the fear that I was experiencing, then I got to the other side, which was purpose. Like, oh, okay, this is frightening. I don't know how big a deal it is. I'm going to do what I can to make it less likely that there's really bad suffering. I'll find my piece of the puzzle to work on, and I'll just be confident that if I'm doing my part, then at least one day when I'm an old man, I'll die happy knowing that I contributed my piece. And so that instinct is what led me to start Lumio with my friends from Occupy. And that was very much an engineering solution. Let's make it easier for people to do collective decision-making. Quite, as far as a theory of change goes, it was pretty simplistic, I guess. Just we know a lot of groups who are trying to do collective decision-making. They're trying to do it online. We'll provide them some technology so they can do it more easily, and that should have some positive outcomes. So not like a big comprehensive class analysis or complexity theory or any of that, but just like quite a simple solution for a reasonably simple problem. And then over the years of working on that project, I kind of got bored of technology and got much more interested in the human relationships and what was going on in our team. And we, after a few years, we got a team together that I felt was really extraordinary. Like the way that we were working together was really extraordinary. And so I got interested in that method, which, you can call like self-management or horizontal or non-hierarchical or whatever you call it. But we developed some working methods that I thought were really cool. And then my partner, Nati, and I started traveling to share those methods. And then we moved to Europe, and in my travels here, meeting with a lot of people, people who, how do I describe them? People that have a high degree of education, whether that's formal or informal education, like they understand a lot about what's happening in the world, and they really have a sense of justice or a sense of hope for how the world could be better, a sense of purpose, like we need to be engaged in making the world better, those kind of people. I noticed that a lot of them seemed to be, well, my projection on them anyway, I felt like they were missing something that I had, which is this combination of belonging and meaningful work, like having those two things happening at the same time. So like genuine, deep community, which now during the pandemic, everyone's seeing who has community and who doesn't. And then the meaningful work piece being like, do I get to spend like when I wake up at the start of the day, do I get to put my energy towards something that feels meaningful, or do I have to go to some job that I don't like and do something that feels useless so that I can get money to pay the rent and so on? And I felt from the people that I know around Europe, both of those, a lot of people are really missing one or both of those things, the belonging or the mutual, the meaningful work. And so that's the background to my Microsolidarity project, is social methodologies for the hypothesis is that we can work out how to produce belonging in this context where people are hypermobile, like that people only live in a apartment building for 2 years and then they move to the next city or the next suburb. They're crossing all over the place. They're not rooted. Can we develop methods of relationship that still meet those very deep belonging needs and provide deep solidarity for people that are not they're not in an old-fashioned village, that they're moving all over European cities? Can we still have a sense of belonging even when we're moving like that? And all of the people that I know that are doing cool social change, activists, make the world better kind of thing, can we also get them paid? Is there a way that we can take a kind of entrepreneurship approach to making some decent money while we do something meaningful, so we don't have to just do it out of charity or do it as a volunteer and then burn out? So that's the kind of frame that I have now for Microsolidarity. And then now, in the last couple of weeks, now there's a pandemic and things have got to change because Microsolidarity has been focused on face-to-face gatherings. And now the world demands, how do we do meaningful relationship without physical contact? So that's kind of the next chapter that we're in now.
Mm.
So that's enough for me.
Yeah. Actually, maybe later we can get into that, but I found really interesting, actually really stimulating that in your Microsolidarity project you were actively engaged with the economies of how this, how economy is facilitator for these things to really work on. Because if it's just pure activism, then you have the other part of the coin that you were commenting on, having a meaningful work that it gets you also to have a decent life also. And that's I think that's something that many people are missing. And yeah, so I found really relevant that part. So really get into the economic, let's say economic part of how this sustains itself, and how we can make it so we don't get at the end precarious, because many of us are really engaged in these kind of networks, and many of them, they also have these in their DNA. They have this precarious kind of approach to building to building action at the end. So I found really interesting, but maybe we can get later into that part, because I have a complete question about the Microsolidarity project, which I found really interesting. I would be really brief into my presentation, but it's funny because you always find people kind of coming from really different backgrounds, like for example me and you, and somehow being interested in same kind of questions or same kind of situations. So a little bit my background. I'm a child from the, let's call it, from the development of Spain. So my parents are working class families who got the chance to go to university. They were the first in their families to go to university. So I was raised in a left-leaning kind of family atmosphere. So I always had this thing, like, let's call it like this kind of critical sense of reality in my background. But at the same time, I was completely middle class kind of mindset. For example, the narrative in my family has always been really engaged with the successful kind of build a successful career. So I don't know. I was always like a really good student. So like the easy path was to get into engineering. So that's what I did. Just because I never had the chance, or I never kind of confronted that narrative of success. So I got into product engineering design. I got really fed up really in the beginning. So I was really engaged with matter in a really, let's call it, in a really material way somehow. I had the chance to go to Denmark to study there. So I got deep. I started to understand that I didn't want to be to put more stuff into the market. Let's call it like this. Yeah. So I started to realize that there was something behind all the products, all the systems to get this matter into form, and all the relational aspects of these systems. So I got there in Denmark. I got in contact with eco-design. So somehow, not too much designing for giving form to matter and those processes, but also thinking about the whole systems in which these products are engaged. So how is this relational part? From that part, I also somehow I evolved my practice to somehow take into account that it's not only the more systemic part related to only to matter, but also to human factors. So that's why I got engaged more into service design, strategic design. And in that moment of my life is where when I met Adria. I don't know if you have ever met him, because he's part of Holland, also the same collective as me. I think you have met Marcel from Holland sometime, I think. And Marcela maybe also, maybe you yeah. So we founded Holland, which is a cooperative and a design collective, which we are engaged with design for the emerging paradigm. So somehow we are helping companies, organizations that want to do this transition towards what's going to come or what needs to come. So that's why I got more engaged into, let's call it, the human factors. And later on, engaging with all the post-human condition, and engaging also with spiritual factors, cultural factors, etc. More engaged into what we call transition design. So how we can use design as a medium, or as a culture, as a way of doing things or thinking things to help. I used to say accelerate the transition, but I'm not sure is the term that I want to use anymore. But yeah, to accelerate that transition towards what is needed somehow.
I've also removed accelerate from my language.
Yeah, you are moving out of that.
Just the word accelerate is like, well,
yeah.
Because I think the transition is towards slowness.
Yeah.
You don't speed up to go slower, right?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, and it's funny because now all the whole accelerationist movement, in philosophy is also taking like lots of space. So whenever you are speaking about acceleration, it can have many different and extremely opposite kind of approaches to the term. So yeah, I'm also trying not to say it that much. So the point is that the last year I decided, I needed to stop. So somehow to get some time to reflect about my practice, about who I am, what I want to do. Somehow I got into this kind of crisis state, I guess, in which I wanted to slow down and to have some time for developing new stuff and for growing. So I engaged into what I call my open masters. Is that I decided to give myself 12 months to do a self-directed and self-led action research project. And I was looking for like formal education, and I didn't find anything that really and like somehow moved me enough. So I decided to do it myself. So somehow this is like one of the meta projects which I have been involved these past months, like how you can lead a self-led like education program. So yeah, in these past months I have been engaged in different topics and readings and stuff. But one of the things that have also coming from a more spiritual, or let's say, I don't know, trying to hear myself, I have been really interested into social systems. So I have a pretty strong background in complexity science and systems design, but really I was more engaged into the, let's call it, socio-technical part of these systems. So I got really interested into the how this way of seeing the world could apply to social phenomena. So that's something that I have been trying to understand the past months. I have been reading a lot about social science, for example, that I didn't know a bit about, philosophy and other kind of stuff. So yeah, I kind of still have these questions that I'm trying to explore. So a little bit, how do we organize, or how have we organized? How social autopoiesis is disclosed. So how social creation, or how the social is invented somehow. I'm really interested into this idea of inventing the social. So, and that's a big, let's say, step apart from social science. I don't want to, this project is not about describing realities. It's a little bit about trying to invent something. So I'm really stimulated by this idea. There's some researchers in social science that are also proposing this inventive practice. So how from the social work you can really invent something new. And really also the questions that were like I was engaged with was also how we can stimulate this self-organizing or autopoiesis kind of thing, and really taking into account these like swarming qualities. How we can do it better, because we are already doing a lot of stuff about self-organizing, but I also was interested in the effectiveness of these movements, and also how we can be more strategic, like socially, in which kind of political targets we are deciding somehow. So yeah, by now I've been exploring different stuff. I've been reading a lot. I think I have been reading too much, maybe. I am a little bit concerned about that. That it's been a little bit too onwards right now. So that's why I also wanted to, I am speaking with a lot of people because I need also to somehow to get into other qualities. So yeah, I've been reading a lot or building my theoretical scaffold about social learning, about social movement theory, about social practice theory. I have also in the past months really, by the way, inspired by you and all the integralists and other meta-modern whatever thinkers right now out there, reading about development and psychology, social systems and complexity, etc. I have also been engaged with, and I never know how to speak about this. I think you also have the same problem because you said like 3 synonyms, but yeah, I have been engaged with decentralized direct action or deliberative spaces and peoples. So yeah, decentralized organizations, social movements. I have been engaged with lots of local social movements because that's something that is really important to me, so that my practice is really situated. And so yeah, I've been engaged with local communities, and I have really been engaged also with the anarchist collectives and the anarchist background here in Barcelona, which I find really inspiring. Yeah, I have also been exploring like which is the code out there, which are the patterns and the tools available, and also again thinking about which is the genealogy of self-organizing. So which movements have happened in the recent history and in the past history about us people being organized for bringing change somehow. I don't know if you have some questions by now, or
I'm so happy and with you. Like I recognize the references, and I'm so happy that you've put the design on the conversation to make it pretty as well. It's
okay.
Really
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to get like too deep into the more like, let's say, theoretical or model behind what I'm doing, but I just want to bring a couple of things which I think is relevant from how I'm approaching this understanding and inventing of the social. So basically, I'm doing it. I'm using two models for my work. One is social practice theory, and the other one is transition management theory. So I'm trying to see this challenge from these two perspectives. The first one, I don't know if you are ever heard about social practice theory. Well, I don't get...
There's some important context from me, which is I'm really stupid in lots of ways. Like I really don't understand most existing theory that's been developed on all the topics that I'm interested in. I'm very much an amateur, do-it-myself kind of person. So I'm very happy to learn from you what you've learned from studying the theory.
I'm also really stupid about that. I mean, I'm diving just the surface of all these things, and I neither know if I want to engage more neither, because I'm a designer. I'm really based into practice. So this is just me engaging with theory at a really surface level. So I will explain it as I understand, which is really easily. But yeah, so social practice theory basically is like body of work and theory engaged with understanding social phenomena. And somehow I like it a lot, and which, by the way, is pretty meta-modern also, because social practice theory somehow builds a bridge between those theories that are more norm-oriented. So let's put it like they try to understand social phenomena from a structuralist stance. So all the structures that sustain these social phenomena are power, biopolitics, whatever, are those that are building these social phenomena. And in the other extreme, those theories that put the weight into individual action and all the behavioral scientist kind of stance of understanding social phenomena. And one of the things that I like about social practice theory is that somehow it stands in the middle. So it's a cultural theory, so it understands social phenomena from a cultural point of view. And it puts the unit of analysis not in the discourse or in the human mind or in the communication, but in the practices. So somehow all the routinized body-mind behaviors that people are engaged with in their daily lives. And that's something that is really relevant to me. Like it's really a theory that is engaged with the daily life, with the with body minds also. So it's not only like a rationalist kind of approach to understanding social phenomena, but it engages with all the stuff that we engage with in our practices, all the skills that we use for engaging in these practices, and also all the imaginaries that we somehow we follow for engaging with these practices. And from seeing this perspective of self-organizing or whatever, from this point of view, I found different insights, let's call it. One of them is that there's already, and here is the connection with why I wanted also to speak with you, is that because I have found that there is already plenty of code, of patterns, of tools, and there are many of them that are really, they are really cool. Lumi is really cool, for example. You know, like the thing is that it already exists and it's really good and it's really well done. There's a lot of patterns, codes, tools. I think that somehow I have understood that that's not the main problem. The main problem is that not that we don't have the tools or the code to engage with this kind of social change through self-organizing. I have found that there's a strong action point in, let's call it in the lower part of this model. So first in the skills, so how do we engage or practically with these tools, and also the whole lived experience / phenomenology of this experience. So how do I get awake or politicized or whatever, and how is this experience of somehow this perceptive experience of evolving my understanding of social phenomena, engaging with other people to change it, which is my perception of agency, of attractiveness, or of slowness or not. So I have been also really engaged with all the aesthetic dimension, so the relational aesthetic dimension of these kind of movements, which I think is one of the points that can be really, really leveraged in the kind of research that I have been doing. So yeah, so I have been really interested in this lower part of this model, and also I have been really, really interested in. So there's lots of practices, let's call it in the outskirts, you know, so not in the mainstream. I'm really, really interested into how these practices could be mainstreamed. So could be practices that anyone can engage with. And that's also why coronavirus was really interesting to me, because I think somehow it's diluting the membrane of what's mainstream. So now many people are engaged with remote work, for example, that maybe nobody thought of 2 months ago. So I'm really interested in how these practices could be mainstreamed, and somehow how we could build this social learning so we can evolve. And here's all the socio-psychological developmental kind of mindset. So how we could collectively evolve or mature in being ready for using more of this kind of stuff. Yeah. And then, and I will be really brief also with this, I have been not only engaged, so the last model was engaging with the granular level, so how is the aesthetics and the phenomenology of being there provoking or engaging in change. But I have also been really interested more in the systems view, so how systemically these chains are developing, and that's why I'm using this multi-level perspective for transition management theory. And so what I've been basically interested in is how we can help proliferate these kind of free social spaces, or so these communities that are organizing in the outskirts and they are doing weird stuff, weird practices, but not only how we can proliferate these kind of free social spaces, but also how we can, when there's an opportunity, like for example now with coronavirus, how we can help those practices get into the mainstream. And at the same point, I have been also really interested into not only how we can help proliferate these free social spaces and make them mainstream, but also how we can somehow help this evolution of beings in the world. So how we can socially be more evolved and keep these, let's say, like this consciousness level being more engaged with this situation. Yeah. So yeah, at the end, basically where I am now, right now, after all these things, speaking with people, doing research, engaging with some prototypes, etc., is that I am really interested into not make a description of what's going on, but to really trying to invent something. So I'm also really inspired by anarchist like prefigurative kind of approach. So this idea of somehow creating new worlds by enacting them, like in really small scale. So, and I'm also really interested in speculation as a device. So right now, where I am is I'm trying to use design, speculative design, as somehow as a prefiguration device for building worlds. So that's right now that I think that's my calling. I think that I can use that approach of speculation through design for prefiguration of new worlds somehow. So yeah, after all these this stuff, basically right now I'm engaged into 5 different leverage or action points, which I am really interested in, and I will be developing. And that's something that, by the way, I found really inspiring about your work, because in some moment I read, this is my plan for the next 5 years of my life, something like that. And I'm really interested, also really interested into this. So how building like long-term or medium long-term kind of personal plans or agendas. So somehow I'm also really inspired by this. So I have been 12 months working in this, but I'm planning to make this 5-year plan somehow. So yeah, which leverage points have I found? Yeah, the first one is about sense making. So how we can build or set up perceptive devices. So new people are awoke and new free spaces are developed somehow. So a new free space is created when someone when a collective somehow sees a new reality that she didn't understand or she was not aware of. So how we can really build these perceptive devices so more people are engaged with more realities that are out of their influence circle or reality or class reality or whatever. And the second leverage point is building relational aesthetics for overcoming the experiential flows of self-organizing, which I think I have a map about some of them, and I'm really interested into how, from the aesthetic point of view, we can build on that. And yeah, I'm also really interested into how the asynchronous and synchronous collaboration can really emerge from an aesthetic point of view or experiential point of view. I'm also really interested, I didn't tell you, but I have a background also in theater and dance, so I'm really interested into how we can leverage this lived experience by embodied ways of understanding and communicating. So bringing this embodiment into and the affects into these change experiences. The third part, in which I think you are engaged right now with Microsolidarity project, is I think it can be helpful to emerge useful methodologies for sustaining self-organization spaces and processes, which I really think it's something that is needed, and also support the spreading, accumulation, and access to social learning. So anytime a new community engages with a self-organizing process, they don't have to start from zero. So somehow we can build up on already accumulated knowledge about this. So somehow also we can be also more effective as a society in building these processes. So yeah, so this is mainly what I've been working with, and I got really moved by this tweet in which you were commenting or somehow sharing the same approach, like, oh, there's plenty of tools. I think that's not the key question right now, is how we can elaborate on these methodologies or so yeah, I have this here, just a couple of questions, but I don't want just them to follow them just in order. It's just if you have any comment about what have you heard, or I don't know. I'm just curious about your takeouts.
Okay, my reflection. I really do appreciate the design and the aesthetic. The like, and the fact that you're doing this all in English. Are you always working in English, or are you working in Spanish as well?
Both of them, yeah. In the collective, we are using Catalan,
right.
Spanish, and English. So
right.
yeah.
Okay. That's really impressive to be able to communicate these very difficult topics, and I feel like I understood most of what you're saying, and it's hard enough for someone that's a native speaker to get that stuff right. So that's really impressive, and just the I think I do agree with your sense that aesthetics is a leverage point. Like I spent a little bit of time with activists in Taiwan and Korea, and both of those places, it felt like they had, just in the simplest way, the aesthetics were way more attractive in their social movements than what I'm familiar with in the West, where it's usually antagonistic, where it's usually like, we are the cool, bad, radical people, and if you like us, then you're cool, and if you don't like us, you're an asshole. And that's kind of like the visual identity and the posture and everything. Whereas what I saw, especially in Taiwan, was a lot of stuff that was like cartoonish and colorful and friendly and inviting, you know, like it just seems fun and silly, and you want to join in because it's got that it's just an inviting aesthetic. So I recognize that, and I feel like in my own work I've been missing it to an extent. Like I have the aesthetic of my voice, so when I'm writing, I'm telling stories, and I'm putting the minimum amount of theory and the maximum amount of embodiment into the written word, and people respond to that, I think, and it brings me a lot of pleasure to write that way. Whereas writing in an abstract, theoretical way, I just don't know how to do it and don't have any plan of learning. But beyond that, I really feel like my aesthetic capabilities are really limited. You know, like I don't feel like I can structure my thoughts in a visual way, or produce graphics and just kind of the stylistic dimension of it. Like I haven't got that. That doesn't feel like my strong suit. And so like I've been hoping to find more people that can contribute that part to the puzzle. There's so many pieces in here, hey? It's, I guess the one that jumps out is, could be interesting to talk about our perception of the flaws. I think you said the experiential flaws of self-organization, like what basically what in my language, like what goes wrong, like how there are so many people that are already trying, and my experience is that they're often failing for the same reasons. So there's that piece, and another piece that I think might be interesting to talk about is what do you mean when you say patterns, and how kind of like how patterns can go wrong, or like how maybe that's not the best way to think about it, but how, in my view at least, these practices, structures, methodologies, they need to be adaptable. They need to be responsive to their local context. And so it's really common when people are starting out, the first time they try and construct a self-organizing space, they think, well, I know I've got some instinctive knowledge that we have to develop our own methodologies. Like the things that are out there in the world don't fit us. They've come from a different source of values, and so we're going to have to construct something ourselves. And so I see all these people thinking that they're starting from a blank canvas and constructing their own methodologies and ways of working, and not really recognizing that there is no such thing as a blank canvas, that they're all learning from each other. And therefore they're all failing for the same reasons, because they're unconsciously copying the same behaviors. So my sense of like what makes a pattern, what qualifies as a pattern is like a unit of methodology that can actually be replicated in different contexts safely. And there's only very few of those that I know about, whereas there are lots of frameworks or ways of thinking about organization, or practices that people use that just don't replicate safely into other contexts.
Yeah, I agree with what maybe I didn't explain myself too well, but I was not saying or I was not arguing against patterns. I was saying that there's many of them. So a little bit the image would be we have collectively built a workshop full of really nice and shiny tools. But then you have to do, I don't know, a chair, and you don't know which of the tools is the best.
Yeah.
And then when you take one of the tools, you really don't, you end up using, I don't know, the drill to hammer a nail somehow. So as there are so much good stuff out there, I think we are still lacking like clarity on when something can be used, how to really build confidence in using the tools. How is this also this learning process of being engaged with more and more complex tools time by time. I don't know, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's already lots of content, really good content.
Yeah.
I think what is lacking is the experience of actually getting these patterns and using them in the right moment, the right way somehow.
Yeah. And I mean, the reason that I moved my focus from building the Lumio tool to now Microsolidarity and my, training company, the Hum, is because we built the tool and I felt like, okay, I mean, there's room for improvement, but the tool is basically good. It does the thing that we wanted it to do. And anyone that's experienced, so, any group that's done some collective decision-making and has a digital practice can basically pick up Lumio and they get it. So, okay, yeah, that's the thing that I need. But then my curiosity was that, well, how come there's not more groups that are doing collective decision-making and have a digital practice? That's like, why are they so rare? That was the question that motivated me to move on to the next thing, to get away from the tools and go, like you would say, how do you invent these new social spaces that construct this new spaces of possibility where people would know that they need Lumio, That was the bit. That's like kind of upstream from the problem that I thought we were working on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, somehow I was also really curious about when you stated that those methodologies are needed. Somehow Microsolidarity is your response to that. So somehow I was understanding, and this is my take about your project, and it's always a little bit scary to do this, but somehow I was understanding Microsolidarity project as I think I have written that there. So somehow like a minimum mutual aid network somehow.
Yeah.
So like how you can engage with building, like let's use the startup jargon, like minimum viable mutual aid network somehow. Yeah. Is that what you were thinking when you were
very
building?
much? Yeah. And it borrows a lot from that startup methodology as well, because it's not just minimum viable; it's also doing that the sort of lean, agile stuff about just deliver something useful today. It doesn't matter if it's totally crap. Just make it like, give me one tiny micro unit of value, and then next week make it 2 units, and then next week make it 3 units. And that, for me, that just means start right now with the people around you and do something, even if that something is so simple that it's like 3 friends. I'm going to do this on Friday. I've got 3 friends, and we meet every Friday morning for an hour on a call. And we don't have an agenda, and it's just a chance to talk with each other and get to know each other more and deeper. Like there's no big story about the ambition or anything. It's just this little thing that we do that is providing some mutual care and some opportunities for reflection and insight. So just do something small. And what we've agreed is that we're going to do this 10 times. And on the 10th time, we're going to have a reflection where we look back and we go, so what did we like? What was good about that experience, and what was not so good? And do we want to do another 10 weeks? And if we do we want to do those a bit different? Is there something we want to try that's a bit different? And so there's this, that's the agile retrospective, the Scrum retrospective process, like just stop and reflect on what you did and make sure that the next iteration is slightly better. And that for me is like how the appropriate patterns find their place. Is you make sure that you've created a container for reflection and innovation, and you say, hey, I would like to change how we work. I would like to change how we relate to each other. And I heard about this cool practice. I read about it in a book, or I saw it on the podcast or whatever. And you've got a space that's in the calendar already that's part of your regular recurring practice where you can say, I want to try this new thing. And people can say yes. and it's not like you don't have to stage a mini revolution, you know, like it's embedded into your normal way of working as you do this regular reflection and innovation process. So that to me, like, is the essential, as far as like a practice that you can easily see, that's the essential one. It's like, do something very simple and then reflect on it and make it slightly better next time. And I think that process just generates so much. It's like a generator function that produces so much creativity, and people will go in all sorts of different directions based on that. There's probably also a lot underneath, you know, I said that's the easy thing that you can point to and you can see this is a practice, but then there's a lot of stuff underneath that line, which is harder to see, which I think is about like the character of the people and the relationships and the sort of, social norms and cultures and values and all those sorts of things, which for me, I find a lot harder to articulate, to point my finger or put a signpost on and say, you should be doing this, or this works for people that are like that. I'm not really sure how to address that part.
When I was listening to you, I was asking myself, somehow I understand that you have been engaged with many groups that are trying to organize themselves. And right now you are building this superstructure or this methodology of microsolidarity. So if you project yourself in, in 2 years, and let's say that many groups have been starting these kind of processes, which kind of flaws or not going so well at moments, do you think those groups will find? I mean, in your experience?
Yeah. So before, like between Lumio and Microsolidarity, my partner and I started the Hum, and the research question for the Hum is like, what does everyone get wrong when they try and make a decentralized organization? And out of that, we collected what we call our patterns for decentralized organization. So they name all these flaws and what you can do about them. So they're very likely to we've changed how we order them all the time, but like there's at least 10 of them. And probably everyone is going to hit somewhere between 3 and 10 of them. So it's like decision making. Do you have an explicit methodology for making decisions? And if you do you understand that there are more than 2 options? Because people, when they don't give it a lot of thought, they kind of instinctively believe that decisions are either like a top-down autocratic dictatorship, or they're a consensus where everyone has to be engaged and you have to do the long process. And I think those are the 2 options. And of course, there's actually like an infinity of different ways that you can do decisions. And probably most groups need to define like maybe 2 or 5 different decision methods and say, for this category of decision, use this method, and for this category, use that one. You know? So huge number of groups stumble on that. And they try and do everything by consensus, and it doesn't work. Or they say, no, consensus is no good for us. And so then they have this kind of dictatorship thing, which is not very fun. Another one is money. So like having to deal with money. And it's very, very common to see, especially groups that have more like radical activist types. They just tend to have a lot of, I think, and I'm speaking from my own experience, I include myself in this, a lot of psychological baggage around money, which makes any conversation about money really difficult and potentially explosive. And so then we design, this is a common pattern, we design complicated structures to avoid having uncomfortable conversations. So there'll be a lot of that where people think that they have to articulate a very complex constitution, which has all of these rules and checks and balances and just really complicated. Yeah, that's one you'll see is like lots and lots of complicated rules. And this mythology that if we just wrote down the right rules, then everything would go well. We would never have to have an uncomfortable conversation. You know, that there's people have this kind of imaginary wish that we could have the perfect constitution and then we're never going to have these clashes between people. Yeah, there's lots of them, you know, just general conflict. Like, conflict is going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. And how are you going to respond to it when it does? And I always try and remind people to talk about conflict while you're in your honeymoon. You know, like when you're really happy and excited with each other, talk about, hey, if there's a time in 6 months where we've got a really difficult disagreement and it feels like we don't love each other anymore, how do we want to deal with that? You know, like what are the principles of our relationship when we get to that point? And work that out while you still love each other, because otherwise you just pretend or you imagine that it's never going to happen. And then one day it happens and you don't love each other anymore. And then you're going to try and make a crisis, you know, trying to make a conflict resolution policy in a crisis. It's just impossible because you don't trust each other anymore. So you can't construct that architecture. So yeah, there's lots of things like that.
Yeah, by the way, I have read the book, so I have done my homework. So yeah, I was just really curious about which of them like popped out in your mind, which would be the most.
I think there's gonna, of the ones that are responding so far, I think there's gonna be people that have way too much theory and not enough practice.
Yeah.
And because I tell a attractive story, they're gonna like think, oh, if I just copy what Rich is doing, then it will work. Or I need to read the same sources that Rich is reading, or I don't know. I don't know how exactly that's going. That's is a strange position to be in, you know, to have this. I'm trying to just tell my own story. I'm trying to stay within my own experience and intentionally construct my story in a way that I hope it is useful to others. But I'm not. I'm really trying to avoid talking about things that I haven't seen or done, and that's a really challenging line to walk, you know. And there's I think there's a kind of pressure on me to produce a very nice, clean framework, and you know, to make these claims about how groups are, and I'll get lots of praise and attention if I do that, but it won't be accurate. And you know, like my ego wants to do that. My ego wants to say, look, hey, I know everything about groups, and here's the answer.
Yeah, you would have to fight with that, I guess. And also if you get attention, also like, you know, you've got like the position to be able to do that. I mean, so that's always hard, I guess.
I mean, and you watch, like, it's happened to 1,000 other people. There's so many people that have some kind of insight into how organizations work, and then they become a consultant and they produce a framework and a model, and it becomes private knowledge, and you can pay, and you'll get your licensed access to their magical framework, which is going to change everything. And I just really don't believe it. I don't believe that that we're sufficiently discerning to be able to produce abstractions, to be able to distinguish between abstractions that are high value and low value. Like that's the thing that I'm really noticing at the moment, especially around Game B. And maybe it's the same in the meta modern conversations, but I've been tuned out of them. But in Game B, it's really striking me that how do I explain it? It's like, it's one thing to be good at explaining things, you know, like to be able to tell a story, to create a framework or a model or a metaphor and say, like, this connects to this, to this, to this. And then the audience says, wow, that's really great. I get it now. Yeah, that's one skill. And there's another skill, which is actually to be able to practice. You know, there's like, there's the skill of talking about football, and then there's the skill of playing football.
Of being in the field, and
it's really hard to tell, like when we're engaging, especially when we're engaging just through text, you know, like through emails and Facebook and stuff. It's really hard to distinguish who's a good player from who's a good talker. So that's going to be an issue, I think, is, I guess you'd call it like, how do you credential leadership? You know, what is that, the quality to say, like, this person is really worth listening to. Like, and even not just worth listening to, but who has enough experience that I would even override my own intuition because they said, you know, you should take option B instead of option A. And there's going to be times where you need to do that. And I really believe in a kind of lineage to solve that challenge, you know, like to have a sense of who your elders are, and that when you get into a really difficult dilemma, you can go to your elders and say, hey, how would you respond in this? And I think those elders are hard to find.
I think that's also the reason why I'm really, and again, also from my point of view as designer, I'm really, I'm not wondering to, or I'm not looking to build like the final model or the final Bible of how this could be doing better. But I'm really looking forward to do stuff here in Barcelona. So like to build something that can really engage with real life experience, lived experience of what this is in real life somehow. So that's why I'm all the time, because I'm not, somehow I'm attracted to theory, but I'm all trying to avoid it in the sense of I'm all the time trying to, okay, like let's come back to think as a designer and build something, prototype something, and have this experience of really applying this in your daily life somehow. So yeah, I'm all the time also with this internal battle of being engaged also with the practice, I guess.
There's another piece as well, which is it's like you've got the practice, and there's one part, I don't have the language for this either, but there's one part of the practice which is the thing that you can write down and put on paper and send to the other side of the world that says, this is an active listening process, and the first person speaks for 5 minutes, and then the second person listens and they reflect back what they heard, and you have these instructions, a recipe. And then there is some you could call it like the spirit that animates that recipe, like that some people, some very highly experienced practitioner will have a methodology they use, and they'll know, and they can tell you it's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But what they don't know is that they've got all of this tacit knowledge that they've embodied about, like, when this circumstance arises, the way that I'd actually respond is like that, and I would bend the rules in this way, and all those sorts of things are really hard to articulate. And so I wonder what's going to happen with people copying the recipe perfectly, but misunderstanding the core intention or some of that tacit knowledge just not being passed along. I don't know what kind of weird, distorted Frankenstein social processes we're going to see because of that. So that'll be one to pay attention to.
Yeah, that's why I was also really interested into not too much on the tools, but also on the how do you engage with tools somehow. So I've been reading a lot, like these past months, Heidegger, which I find really inspiring sometimes, to understand, because we are all there's full of hammers out there, and then you end up first believing that everything is a nail, and then maybe you end up losing somehow the embodied knowledge that not ever reaching the knowledge of the carpenter that knows how to really engage in which situations, and with you can also only access those in practice somehow. So organizing my thoughts, I was thinking that the only way of assessing or being sure that those people are using those patterns in a profound way is that they have to engage with practice, and they will end up somehow building that. Because tools give somehow a sufficiency feeling. Like, okay, I've got a tool for that. Let's use it.
Yeah. And it's a risk for me, like working in the groups that I'm working in now, where I'm. What the group needs is for me to be local and responsive, and to say, like, show up as myself with my embodied intelligence in this present moment. But there's a part of me that wants to go like, but I'm working in these 4 groups at once, and what's the patterns between them, and can I extract something abstract? And so, like, instead of just responding with what the group needs, I'm responding with what I think would be the nicest tool, or what would be the nicest recipe. And I've got to continuously undermine that tendency in myself, and stick to the first principle, which is, like, if in doubt, trust yourself, trust your guts, trust your eyes, trust your feet on the soil in the place that you are with the people that you are with. So for instance, we were just about, I've gone through this long deliberative process. We're just about to put forward a proposal in one of my mutual aid networks with a whole set of structural agreements, like this is how we're going to organize for the next couple of years. And because like this was supposed to happen about this time last week, that we're going to launch this proposal, and because of the virus and people being distracted, we said, you know what, we should leave this. I mean, we've put a lot of work, but we should just put it aside for now, because we need to respond to the moment that we're in instead of our abstract ideas about the moment. We actually just have to respond. And like what responding to this moment means is being emotionally available and attentive and responsive to each other. It doesn't mean having this big theoretical debate about our structure. You know, like that's not what we need right now. And it's that's at least as important, that skill, as the abstract, you know, the structural one is to be relationally aware and present.
Okay, Richard, I just wanted to point out that it's already 2:00, so I think that we had 1 hour for the talk, just for for being aware of that. So it's I could be speaking about this the whole day, but I'm sure you have many things to do.
I do, but I would like to talk again sometime. I really feel like we're just getting started on something. It's really fascinating the way that you have articulated all this and brought it together. It's very inspiring to me. So I feel like if we had more conversations.
Yeah, I would love it. I would love it, definitely. Yeah, when I think it would be really nice to meet again, maybe when I can tell you anything about, what happened with the prototypes and what happened with when I was engaged in the floor, in the field, with the ball, playing soccer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One thing I'd really love, and if you want to, if it fits, is in the Microsolidarity Lumio group. My one vision I have is that there's just lots of people like you who are just using that place as a diary to log their own experiments and say, like, we're doing this community, we brought these deliberations forward, this is the model, that just periodically, if you want, we could put that video there if you felt comfortable with that.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, it would be perfect.
And just to have people documenting in parallel and then being able to, tune in with each other and say, oh, what did you learn there?
My only insecurity is my poor English, but I hope I hope anyone can understand my Spanish kind of shitty English.
I understood you, I think, very well.
Okay,
it's really good English.
So yeah, I wanted just to ask you one more thing. Well, first, I will. Well, I don't know if it will happen or not, but I just bought the tickets for the .NET Convergence. I think you will be there, right?
Yeah. Well,
if it happens physically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's one thing, and the other thing that I wanted to ask you if you ever come to mind to someone that I should definitely speak to, something like that. I'm really very much into personal recommendations on people to be engaged with. So if you ever come or to someone that really can help us, speak to the others somehow. So someone that maybe would like to speak to me, or the other way around, someone that I would be interested to speak to. I would be really pleased and happy if you could do this kind of connection. So
I love playing that game. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Richard. It was really a pleasure. And yeah, it was really nice also to engage with you, see your face, and not only in the social network game, which I'm not really good at neither. So thank you very much for allocating this space to see each other.
It's my pleasure. I feel very happy and stimulated to meet you, and I look forward to our next conversation. Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Take care, and well, let's see how this goes, this coronavirus kind of thing. Fine. Okay, thank you very much.